This is our how-to on how to make different types of tessellations, so you can fast forward to the one you want to learn and follow along. So our first one is a translation tessellation. This one's pretty easy, and we're going to do one side and then the other. So the easiest thing to do is go corner to corner and create a shape. And then you're going to cut this shape out. I'm sorry if you can hear Frank snoring in the background. So we're going to cut this out, and then we are going to take our shape that we cut and move it from the top to the bottom. And then we're going to tape. So when you're taping, you want to make sure that your corners match exactly. If anything's a little bit off when you go to trace your shape, it is not going to match correctly, and then you'll have to start over. So I have my nice shape. I'm just going to trim up the extra tape, being very careful not to mess with the shape. And then that is a translation tessellation just on one side. So to make it more interesting, I'm going to cut another shape from the right side. So you can just do one side. However, I think it's kind of boring when you trace it out because you're just going to have one side. It'll look like a bunch of rows or columns. So I would suggest doing two sides. And it's pretty easy, same thing. I'm just going to take it from one side and then move it over to the next. So I'm taking it from right to left. And then I'm going to tape. And then again, making sure my edges match up properly. Then we're going to trace. So my squares are 3 inches. So this is 12 squares. We're going to be doing 9 in a grid. But if you want to be ambitious, you can also do 12. And when you start to trace, you want to look at the corner of the original square, and then you want to line up that corner with the square on your grid. I'm going to trace my shape, and then this one fits together pretty easily. You just need to keep moving it to the right and then up and down. And since we didn't do anything to the pieces, we didn't flip them, we didn't rotate them, it will fit together perfectly. Just make sure you're aligning it to the corner on the grid, and then things will stay straight. I'd also suggest probably tracing it a little bit lighter than what I did, just so if you need to make any little adjustments. Sometimes you need to kind of fudge it a little bit. You don't have to do a whole bunch of erasing. And you can see you just move it up, you move it to the side, and things will fit together pretty easily. This is definitely the easiest type of tessellation to do. So if you are unsure about what to do, I would start here. And then think about what kind of design you can make with this. All right, so you would just trace your shape across your entire paper like this until you have it filled. Next is a glide tessellation, which is similar to the first one, except with a little bit of a twist. So we're going to start out the same, go corner to corner with your shape. Then we're going to cut out our shape. And the difference is, instead of just moving it from top to bottom, we're going to end up flipping this shape. So that's going to make this one a little bit different than the one before. And then hopefully you guys can cut a little more carefully than I can. Again, I'm really sorry if you can hear Frank eating his foot in the background. So you can see I'm going to take that shape, I'm going to move it to the bottom, and I'm going to flip it. So now that I've flipped it, I'm going to tape it. And just like the first example, you could just do one side. If that's what you want, that's fine, except I don't think it's going to make an interesting of a tessellation because you're going to have, it's just going to be in rows. It's not going to fit together as interesting as it could be. But again, this is up to your skill set. So as an example, if you're just going to do one side, you're going to line up the square. You're going to trace. And then instead of just moving it next door, you have to flip it. Since we did a rotation at the bottom where we flipped it over, now we have to flip our tessellation. So I'm going to trace it. And just as you go along, you're just going to flip it back and forth, since that one piece we flipped when we created the shape. So level 2, we're going to do the same thing. Corner to corner, corner to corner, except we're going to do this on both sides this time. So I'm going to cut out the top. Put it at the bottom, and then I'm going to flip it, so don't forget to flip it. I'm going to tape it together exactly, so make sure you're getting it corner to corner and getting your edges lined up. And then once I do that, I'm going to cut the other side and do the same thing. So I'm cutting. And then same thing, I'm going to move it from that right side to the left. And then I'm going to flip it. So when you're looking at it, you should see the opposite from side to side. And I'm going to tape it together. So then once we tape it together really good, then let's trace. Again, we're going to line up the corners. So make sure it fits in that square correctly. And then while you guys are tracing, I would do it a little bit lighter than what I'm doing, just so you're going to need to finesse it a little bit because nothing is perfect. And you want to be able to erase. So then you're going to take your shape. So remember, we did all these flips. So we need to flip it one way. So not only are we going to have to flip it as we're doing the rows up and down, you're also going to have to flip it when you go side to side. So just take your time and make sure you're connecting the right pieces. So, okay, so I have the first two. So let's do that side. So now I gotta flip it. I gotta figure that out. Flip it over again. So you want to make sure you're matching up those pieces like that. So from side to side you flip it, and then up and down you flip it. So it's a little confusing, but just take your time. Make sure your shapes are lining up and you'll be fine. But it creates a really interesting type of pattern. So when you're creating your design, you can think of some creative things to do with it. So then I can see that little piece fits there. So if you're getting a shape that does not line up, then you probably taped something wrong. And unfortunately, you kind of have to start over at that point. So let's move next door again. All right, so I got to find that piece. I'm going to flip it till I figure it out. So it goes from there, and then I flip it. Okay, so then there, I'm going to flip it the other way. So you can kind of see, depending on which way you're tracing, you have to flip it a different direction. All right, our last is going to be a rotation tessellation. So just like the other ones, we're going to start corner to corner. I'm going to cut out my shape. So for this one, the difference is I'm not going to move it from right to left or top to bottom. I'm going to rotate this piece around the edge like a 90 degrees turn, or maybe 180, I don't know. Anyway, math. So I'm going to rotate it around that corner. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the top one. I'm going to rotate it around that corner. So I'm going to cut. And then I'm going to put the piece back in the way it goes. And then I'm going to rotate it to the left around that corner right there. So it's like it just rotates like in a circle almost. I'm going to tape it together. And then this one looks pretty interesting when you trace it. So the pattern looks like it's coming out from one central corner. And you can see I'm fixing it because I didn't match it up quite exact. So you want to make sure that bottom left corner right there is spot on. Alright, so there's my shape. And as you go along, you'll see these different types of tessellations create different looking shapes. So depending on the creature or design you want to put in that shape, you might pick one based on that. Alright, so tracing this one, same thing, line it up, that corner of the original square with the corner of my grid. Again, you guys probably want to trace lighter than what I'm doing. So now to create this pattern, we are going to rotate it. So it kind of takes me a minute to kind of figure it out. So you gotta move it around. Oh, there we go. So you gotta figure out what little spot it rotates at. So again, just take your time and then trace. And then rotate it. So you can see it rotates around the corner of where those squares meet. And then that one should fit right there perfectly. Then I'm going to rotate it again. So this one also has a pretty distinct look. So depending on your design or your creature, you might like the way this looks. Alright, so there we go. If you need help in class, please ask, and good job.